Thank you very much for the opportunity to present these findings from our chapter in the book, Public Transport and the Built Environment. My name is Murtaza Hirer, and I'm presenting this on behalf of my co-author, Ahmed Al-Ghanedi, and myself. Essentially, we are looking at the enablers of public transit use. The characteristics of built environment are notably known as density, design, and diversity, the famous Cervera-Kokelman paper. But we also know, and the research since then has shown, that not any one of these elements are sufficient. You need a combination of these and then some, and also these enabling attributes are correlated, which is there's multicollinearity, for example, where there's population density is high, so is road density. So it's some design elements got associated with density, and so it's very difficult to isolate the impact of one or the other. And also there's this self-selection bias for people who are likely to travel by public transport will self-sort themselves into neighborhoods that are more supportive of transit use. So it's very difficult, or at least challenging, to find the real enablers of transit use as far as built environment is concerned, or demographics or personal predispositions to the use or of public transit or otherwise. So in this chapter, we were interested in answering the question, or addressing the question, why most urban commuters don't travel by public transit when transit enabling built environment exists. And this is true for places like Toronto, where I live, or Montreal, where we have all forms of public transport, for example, subways, buses, streetcars, and whatnot. And then still, most trips are made by non-transit modes. And when you account for vehicle kilometers traveled, again, automobile is by far much ahead. So why is that the case? And when we thought about it, we realized that some of the things that matter are the transit is better for sure for environment and for other reasons, but it's slower. The average commute times are slower. So I'm going to present briefly more about this in this 5-minute presentation. The other thing is neighborhood vintage matters. So when we do cross urban comparisons, we believe, or we don't account for the age of the neighborhoods. And we found that even new neighborhoods in transit-friendly older cities, and we found that older cities have higher transit use, but even new neighborhoods in older cities do not have much higher transit use. And if you compare the new neighborhoods in old cities with neighborhoods in new cities, you don't find much difference in transit use. So neighborhood vintage, we often don't account for in the built environment. Is something that we would like to see more of it. And then the question we ask is, can built environment of existing places be modified to support transit use? And the answer is, once the neighborhood is paved over, it's quite difficult to reimagine it and repave it into a built form that is supportive of transit use. So I think starting afresh, we can do better. We can build cities better so we don't have transit auto-dependent communities and cities, but doing re-engineering existing cities could be difficult. So some of the findings that I want to share with you in the next 2-3 minutes is that, when we look at data from Canada, we find that even cities with transit systems, higher density and whatnot, we still have transit rides on average longer than by automobile. So if you look at this is figure 23.1 in our book chapter. In Calgary, for example, the average commute time for public transport are much higher, and probably 70% higher in Calgary. And if you look at Montreal, it's still 60% or more higher. In Toronto, again, so the average commute time by public transit is 60% longer than the average commute times by public transit. So if travel budgets are of concern, then yes, car could be the reason why people are gravitating to it. And it's not just Canada. If you look at the US, you see this is data of the core-based statistical areas in the US. You see as population density increases, so does the public transport mode share. It's a universal finding that doesn't change much. But if you look at the other element of it, and you see that public transit mode share, as it increases, so does the commute time. So yes, density helps with transit use, but transit use increases, and so you see an increase in average commute times that is associated with it. So it's not as simple as we thought. And the other thing is the neighborhood vintage. If you compare a more established city like Montreal with a population of and where this is like the Montreal census metropolitan area, and the Labor force is about 1.8 million in the area. Calgary, 684,000 workers. Public transit mode split for the entire census metropolitan areas. Montreal much higher for commute trips, so work trips 25% compared to Calgary, which is 14.5. But if you compare the old neighborhoods, you see Montreal's old neighborhoods have twice as much larger mode split than Calgary. But when you compare the new neighborhoods, the transit mode splits are almost similar. And if you compare the new neighborhoods between the two cities, actually Calgary, which is not known for its density, has higher population density in newer neighborhoods than in Montreal. So the last slide I'm presenting today is that if you take all of Canada, and it's about 500,000 neighborhoods across Canada, and you categorize them in low, medium, and high density, you will realize that the high density neighborhoods that are supportive or thought of being supportive of public transit use, they're roughly fewer than 3% of entire Canada. So that's the challenge that we have, that at the current built form, the transit supportive land use or built environment is very small, and I think the future of future construction should be such that we build cities that support transit use, mobility by transit, and non-motorized modes. But with the existing cities, that would be a challenge. Thank you very much.